A little girl, abandoned, cries in front of a Christmas toy store until a millionaire appears and changes everything. The bells of Trinity Church chimed 9 times, echoing through the snowy streets of Beacon Hill. It was Christmas Eve, and Charles Street twinkled with festive lights and holiday decorations. Hurried families carried last-minute packages, laughing and chatting excitedly. But amidst the joy, a solitary figure stood out. Lily, an 8-year-old girl with tangled brown hair, dressed in a coat too thin for the biting cold, stood before the window of Mr. Harrison's toy emporium. Her tearful blue eyes were fixed on a porcelain doll dressed in a red velvet dress. The doll smiled serenely, unaware of the drama unfolding on the other side of the glass. Lily's small, reddened hands touched the icy pane. Her lips trembled, not only from the cold, but from a sadness too deep for her young age. She murmured something, so softly it could have been just a sigh. Across the street, Arthur Finch, the owner of the store, emerged from the Chestnut Street coffee house. At 55, Arthur was an imposing man, tall, broad-shouldered, with perfectly coiffed graying hair and an impeccable suit that screamed, "Success." He held a cup of hot cocoa, absently observing the bustling street. It was then that his eyes fell on the small figure in front of his store. For a moment he froze. The sight of the lone girl, visibly distressed, contrasted sharply with the festive surroundings. Arthur hesitated. His instinct told him to ignore her, to continue on his way. After all, it wasn't his problem, was it? But something stopped him. Perhaps it was the Christmas spirit, or maybe it was something deeper, a painful memory he'd been trying to suppress for years. With a resigned sigh, he crossed the street. "Hello," Arthur said, his voice gruffer than he intended. "Is everything all right?" Lily turned and startled. Her tear-reddened eyes widened at the sight of the tall, well-dressed man. She took a step back, stumbling on the snowy sidewalk. Arthur instinctively reached out to steady her, spilling his hot cocoa in the process. "Careful," he exclaimed, grasping her arm to prevent her fall. For a moment, they stood there, motionless, a scene frozen in time. The serious millionaire and the abandoned little girl, united by an involuntary gesture of kindness. "Who are you?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. Arthur hesitated. Why was he here exactly? What could he say to this clearly lost and frightened child? I own this store," he replied, gesturing towards Mr. Harrison's toy emporium. "Are you alone? Where are your parents?" The question brought fresh tears to Lily's eyes. She shook her head, unable to answer. Just then, a gust of wind swept down the street, making Lily shiver. Arthur noticed, and for the first time, how lightly she was dressed for the cold. "You're freezing," he said, removing his own overcoat and placing it around her shoulders without a second thought. The coat was ridiculously large, almost swallowing her whole. Lily looked at him, surprised by this unexpected act of kindness. "Thank you," she murmured, clutching the coat around her. Arthur felt something stir within him, a long-buried emotion. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softer now. "Lily," she replied quietly. "Well, Lily," said Arthur, making a decision that would change his life forever. "How about we go inside and talk for a bit? It's cold out here, and I have some hot cocoa inside." Lily hesitated, years of warnings about strangers echoing in her mind. But there was something in Arthur's gaze, a mixture of concern and sadness, that made her nod. As Arthur unlocked the door to the store, he couldn't help but wonder what he was getting himself into. Who was this little girl? Why was she alone on Christmas Eve? And why, after years of building walls around himself, did he suddenly care? Across the street, a figure watched the scene with interest. Mrs. Davis, the local social worker, frowned. She knew Arthur Finch by reputation, a wealthy man but cold and distant. Seeing him help an unknown child was unusual, to say the least. As Arthur and Lily disappeared inside the store, Mrs. Davis made a mental note. Something told her this wouldn't be the last she heard of this strange duo. The snow began to fall harder, covering the footprints on the sidewalk. In the window display, the porcelain doll continued to smile, a silent witness to the encounter that would forever change not only Lily and Arthur's lives, but the lives of everyone on Beacon Hill. The aroma of hot cocoa filled the air, of Mr. Harrison's toy emporium, contrasting with the tense silence between Arthur and Lily. The little girl held her mug with both hands, her eyes wandering around the store, marveling at the toys surrounding her. Arthur watched her, feeling awkward. "So, Lily," he began hesitantly, "can you tell me why you were alone outside?" Lily lowered her eyes, stirring her cocoa with her spoon. "My mom, she said she'd be right back." "But that was yesterday." Arthur's heart clenched. "Yesterday? You spent the night on the street." The little girl nodded, a lone tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I tried to wait, but it was too cold." Arthur felt a surge of anger. What kind of mother abandons her child on Christmas Eve? He stood up abruptly, startling Lily. "Excuse me," he muttered, grabbing the phone. "I need to make a call." As he dialed the police, Arthur was overwhelmed by a wave of memories he'd been trying to repress for years. 20 years earlier, Arthur Finch had been a different man. Married to Eleanor, father of 5-year-old Ashley, he was the picture of happiness. Mr. Harrison's Toy Emporium was just a small neighborhood shop, but it was filled with love and laughter. "Daddy, look!" Ashley would shout, running into the store with a new doll. Eleanor would smile, watching the scene from behind the counter. Arthur would scoop his daughter into his arms, swinging her around. "My little princess." It was that Christmas that everything changed. Eleanor had gone out for some last-minute shopping. A blizzard had started suddenly, violent and relentless. Hours passed, and she didn't return. 2 days later, Eleanor's car was found. She had lost control on the icy road, plunging into a ravine. There were no survivors. Arthur's world had crumbled. He took refuge in his work, expanding the store, turning it into a prosperous chain. But every smile, every child's laughter in the store was a stab at his broken heart. Ashley grew up practically alone, raised by nannies and boarding schools. The few times she saw her father, he was distant, cold, lost in his own world of pain and guilt. "Mr. Finch?" The policeman's voice on the other end of the line brought Arthur back to the present. "We're on our way. Keep the child with you and contact social services." Arthur hung up, turning to Lily. The little girl was looking at him with a mixture of fear and hope that hit him like a punch to the gut. It was the same look Ashley used to give him years ago, before giving up on him completely. "Lily," he said, sitting back down, "the police are coming to help you. They'll try to find your mum." "Will she be mad?" Lily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Arthur hesitated. How could he explain to a child that being abandoned wasn't her fault? "No, Lily. Tayu didn't do anything wrong." At that moment, the store door opened, letting in a gust of cold air and a middle-aged woman with brown hair and a determined look. "Mr. Finch," she said, brushing snow off her coat. "I'm Mrs. Davis, from Social Services. I saw what happened outside and decided to come in." Arthur stood up, feeling strangely defensive. "I've already called the police, Mrs. Davis. We're handling the situation." Mrs. Davis surveyed the scene. The little girl huddled in the oversized chair, her hands still clutching her cocoa mug. Arthur, usually so composed, his hair disheveled and his tie loosened. "I understand," she said softly, "but perhaps I can help." "Lily, is it?" She approached the little girl, smiling kindly. "May I sit with you?" Lily looked at Arthur as if asking for permission. He nodded, surprised by the trust the little girl seemed to place in him after such a short time. Mrs. Davis began talking to Lily, her voice calm and reassuring. Arthur watched, feeling increasingly out of place in his own store. The sound of sirens in the distance made Lily flinch. Mrs. Davis placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It's okay, sweetie. They're here to help." Arthur felt a pang of, jealousy? Regret? As he watched Mrs. Davis comfort Lily, he couldn't help but think of all the times Ashley needed him and he wasn't there. The door opened again, letting in 2 police officers. The older one, a tired-looking man, addressed Arthur. "Mr. Finch, can you tell us what happened?" While Arthur explained the situation, the younger officer approached Lily and Mrs. Davis. Lily huddled further into herself, hiding her face in Arthur's oversized coat. "We'll have to take the little girl with us," the older officer finally said. "At least until we locate her mother or a guardian." "No," Lily suddenly cried, clinging to Arthur's arm. "Please don't leave me." The panic in Lily's eyes was too much for Arthur to bear. Before he even realized what he was doing, he heard himself say, "She can stay with me." A stunned silence fell over the room. Mrs. Davis was the first to recover. "Mr. Finch, I understand your concern, but there are procedures to follow. We can't just—" "Why not?" interrupted Arthur, surprising himself with the vehemence in his voice. "I have room, resources. I can take care of her until we find her family." Mrs. Davis and the police officers exchanged worried glances. "Mr. Finch, Mrs. Davis began cautiously. "Your offer is generous, but caring for a child is not that simple. There are legal, emotional issues." Arthur knew she was right. What on earth was he thinking? He had barely managed to raise his own daughter. How could he possibly take care of a stranger? But then he looked at Lily, saw the fear and hope in her eyes, and knew he couldn't abandon her, not like he had abandoned Ashley. "Please," he said, his voice softer now. "At least for tonight. It's Christmas Eve. She's been through enough already." Mrs. Davis studied Arthur for a long moment, as if seeing him for the first time. Finally, she sighed. "All right, but only for tonight. Tomorrow we'll discuss the next steps." While the police officers took notes and Mrs. Davis explained the procedures, Arthur felt Lily squeeze his hand. He looked down, meeting the little girl's eyes, filled with gratitude. At that moment, Arthur Finch knew his life would never be the same. What he didn't know was how much this impulsive decision would cost him, and how much it would give him in return. Christmas morning dawned cold and silent on Beacon Hill. Arthur woke with a start, momentarily disoriented as he found himself on the living room sofa. The events of the previous night came flooding back. Lily, the police, his impulsive decision. He sat up, stretching to ease the stiffness in his back. A soft sound of breathing drew his attention. Lily was asleep, wrapped in a blanket on the opposite sofa, her face finally at peace. Arthur watched her for a moment, a mixture of emotions churning within him. What was he doing? He knew nothing about children. Heck, he'd barely spoken to his own daughter in recent years. A rumbling stomach reminded him that he had nothing to eat at home. It had been years since he'd spent Christmas here, preferring to travel or bury himself in work. With a sigh, he scribbled a note for Lily and quietly slipped out. The streets were deserted, the overnight snow creating a magical landscape. Most businesses were closed, but a light shone warmly at the end of the street. The Chestnut Street Coffee House. The bell above the door jingled as Arthur entered, the aroma of fresh coffee and warm croissants immediately enveloping him. "Welcome," a cheerful voice called out. "Merry Christmas." John Harrison, the cafe owner, smiled from behind the counter. With his graying hair and warm smile, he was a beloved figure in the neighborhood. "Arthur Finch," John exclaimed, surprised. "I didn't expect to see you today. I thought you'd be on some tropical island, as always." Arthur mumbled a reply, heading towards the counter. "Coffee, strongest you've got. And do you have anything a child would like for breakfast?" John raised an eyebrow. "A child? You?" Sighing, Arthur found himself recounting Lily's story. John listened attentively, his eyes filling with compassion. "My goodness," he murmured when Arthur finished. "What a situation. But you did the right thing, Arthur. That little girl didn't deserve to spend Christmas alone." Arthur rubbed his face, suddenly feeling exhausted. "I don't know what I'm doing, John. I'm not cut out to be a father. I barely remember the last time I spoke to Ashley." John placed a steaming mug of coffee in front of Arthur. "Maybe it's time to change that, eh? Life gives us second chances in strange ways sometimes." Arthur took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth and strong taste soothe him. "But what if I mess it up again? Lily's been through enough already." John smiled kindly. "You know, Arthur, being a father isn't about being perfect. It's about being present, trying, learning from your mistakes. And you have an advantage now. You know what not to do." A comfortable silence settled between them as John prepared a basket with croissants, homemade jam, and a bottle of orange juice. "Here," he said, handing the basket to Arthur. "A Christmas breakfast for you and little Lily, on the house." Arthur tried to protest, but John raised a hand. "Consider it a Christmas gift, and Arthur, if you need any help, I'm here." Grateful, Arthur took the basket and turned to leave, but before he reached the door, it opened, letting in a gust of cold air and a familiar figure. Mrs. Davis, the social worker, stopped, surprised to see Arthur. "Mr. Finch, I was just on my way to your place." Arthur felt his stomach clench. He knew this moment would come, but he'd hoped for more time. "Mrs. Davis, Merry Christmas." Mrs. Davis nodded, her face impassive. "To you, too. Can we talk?" John, sensing the tension, intervened. "Why don't you sit down? I'll get you some coffee." Reluctantly, Arthur and Mrs. Davis settled at a table in the back of the cafe. John brought Mrs. Davis some coffee and discreetly withdrew. "How's Lily doing?" Mrs. Davis asked, her eyes scrutinizing Arthur carefully. "Fine, I think. She was still asleep when I left. I came to get breakfast." Mrs. Davis nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. "Mr. Finch, I understand your concern for Lily, but we need to discuss the next steps. We can't leave a child in legal limbo." Arthur felt a wave of panic. "You're going to take her. Today. It's Christmas, for God's sake." "Not today," Mrs. Davis said softly, "but soon. We need to find her family or place her in a suitable foster home." "What if?" Arthur began, stopping abruptly. What was he about to suggest? Mrs. Davis tilted her head, curious. "What if—" Arthur took a deep breath. "What if I offered to become Lily's legal guardian until we find her family?" Mrs. Davis studied him for a long moment. "Mr. Finch, caring for a child is not a decision to be taken lightly. There are many things to consider: assessments, home visits, training." "I know," Arthur interrupted, "but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Lily needs stability now, not to be tossed around in an impersonal system." A flicker of approval crossed Mrs. Davis's gaze. "Well, I can't deny it's a generous offer, but I have to ask you, why? You barely know Lily." Arthur was silent for a moment, staring at his coffee cup. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Because I've already failed one child, my own daughter. I can't fail again." Mrs. Davis nodded slowly. "I understand." "Well, I can't promise anything, but I can start the process. A full assessment will be necessary, and we'll have to prioritize Lily's best interests." "Of course," Arthur agreed, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. Mrs. Davis finished her coffee and stood up. "I'll let you enjoy Christmas. I'll contact you tomorrow to begin the process. And Mr. Finch, good luck." After Mrs. Davis left, Arthur sat lost in thought. John approached, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You're doing the right thing, my friend," he said softly, "and you're not alone." Arthur looked at his friend, feeling a wave of gratitude. "Thank you, John, for everything." When Arthur finally left the cafe, the snow had started falling again. He paused for a moment, looking up at the grey sky. For the first time in years, Arthur Finch felt something he'd forgotten: hope. Clutching the breakfast basket tightly, he headed home, towards Lily, and towards a future that suddenly seemed full of promise. The days following Christmas passed in a blur for Arthur. Between Mrs. Davis's visits to assess his suitability as a guardian and his efforts to keep Lily occupied, he barely had time to breathe, let alone reflect on the surreal turn his life had taken. One cold January morning, Mrs. Davis arrived for another visit. Lily was at school, a routine Arthur had established with the social worker's help, and the house was quiet. "Mr. Finch," Mrs. Davis greeted him, her professional tone masking a certain concern. "We need to talk." Arthur felt his stomach clench. Had he done something wrong? Was Lily unhappy? "Please, sit down," he offered, leading her to the living room. "Is there a problem?" Mrs. Davis settled on the sofa, pulling a file from her bag. "We've uncovered some information about Lily's parents, specifically her mother." Arthur leaned forward, anxious. "You found her?" "Not exactly," Mrs. Davis replied hesitantly. "But we discovered she worked in Beacon Hill a few years ago, at a local restaurant." "That's good, right?" Arthur asked, puzzled by Mrs. Davis's somber expression. "We can trace her from there." Mrs. Davis opened the file, revealing a photograph. It was a young woman with the same blue eyes as Lily. "This is Amelia Rivers. She worked at the Chestnut Street Coffee House for about a year before disappearing suddenly." Arthur took the photo, studying it carefully. There was something familiar about the face, but he couldn't quite place it. "Guy John never mentioned, yet he may not remember her," Mrs. Davis interrupted softly. "It was almost 9 years ago. But that's not all, Mr. Finch. We found documents indicating Amelia was pregnant when she left Beacon Hill." The realization hit Arthur like a ton of bricks. "Lily," he murmured. Mrs. Davis nodded. "We believe so. The timeline matches. But there's more. Amelia had a complicated past. Petty theft, drug use. She seemed to be trying to turn her life around when she arrived in Beacon Hill, but..." Arthur stood up abruptly, walking to the window. His mind reeled with the implications. Why would she come back now after all these years, just to abandon Lily? "We don't know," Mrs. Davis replied, her voice filled with compassion. "But it complicates things. If Amelia is found, she could face legal trouble. And as for Lily's father, there's no record." Arthur turned back, staring at Mrs. Davis. "What does this mean for Lily? For me?" Mrs. Davis sighed, closing the file. "For now, nothing changes. Lily remains under your temporary guardianship, but we have to be vigilant if Amelia reappears." "She abandoned Lily," Arthur interrupted, his voice hard. "Twice. She has no right." "Legally, she has every right," Mrs. Davis said softly. "She's Lily's biological mother. But I understand your concern, Mr. Finch. Believe me, I'm thinking of Lily's best interests too." Arthur sank back onto the sofa, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. "What do we do now?" "We continue as we are," Mrs. Davis replied. "Lily is safe and well cared for here, but we need to be prepared for any eventuality." After Mrs. Davis left, Arthur sat lost in thought. The thought of losing Lily, of potentially seeing her return to a mother who had abandoned her, was unbearable. Without a second thought, he grabbed his coat and went out, heading towards the Chestnut Street Coffee House. The bell above the door jingled as he entered, the familiar aroma of coffee and croissants, usually comforting, now doing little to soothe his frayed nerves. "Arthur!" John greeted him cheerfully from behind the counter, but his smile faded as he saw the grim expression on his friend's face. "What's wrong?" Arthur approached the counter, lowering his voice. "We need to talk, John, privately." Understanding the seriousness of the situation, John nodded, calling his assistant to take care of the counter while he led Arthur to the back of the cafe. Once they were alone, Arthur didn't beat around the bush. "Do you remember an employee named Amelia Rivers? She worked here about 9 years ago." John frowned, thoughtful. "Amelia? Yes, vaguely. A pretty girl, quiet." "Why?" Arthur took a deep breath. "She's Lily's mother." The shock on John's face was palpable. "My God," he murmured. "I had no idea." "She was pregnant when she left Beacon Hill," Arthur continued. "John, I need to know, do you remember anything at all, that could help us understand why she would abandon Lily now?" John sat down heavily, running a hand through his graying hair. I don't know, Arthur. Amelia was a good employee, but reserved. She never talked much about her private life." Arthur felt frustration rising within him. There has to be something, anything. John hesitated, a strange expression crossing his face. "Well, there was an incident shortly before she left. I caught her crying in the back of the cafe. When I asked her what was wrong, she mumbled something about having made a terrible mistake. At the time, I thought it was just teenage drama. But now..." Arthur leaned forward, anxious. "What? What else?" "She mentioned a name," John said slowly. "Peter. She said he would never forgive her." "Peter," Arthur repeated, his mind racing. "Could that be Lily's father?" John shrugged helplessly. "Maybe. But Arthur, it was so long ago. And if this Peter is the father, why isn't he with Lily now?" The question hung in the air, heavy with dark implications. Arthur stood up, feeling more lost than ever. "Thank you, John. I know it's not much, but maybe it'll give us a starting point." As Arthur left the cafe, the snow was starting to fall again. He paused on the sidewalk, looking up at the grey sky. The mystery surrounding Amelia and Lily seemed to be thickening, and with each new piece of information, Arthur felt fear growing within him. Fear of losing Lily. Fear of not being able to protect her. Fear of failing again, like he had failed with Ashley. But along with the fear, there was something else, determination. He wouldn't let Lily be hurt again. Whatever happened, he would be there for her. With that resolve firmly anchored in his heart, Arthur headed home. It was time to pick Lily up from school, and for the first time in his life, he was eager to hear about her day, to see her smile, to be the father he had never been for Ashley. The mystery of Amelia and Peter would have to wait. For now, Lily needed him, and Arthur was determined not to let her down. Winter gave way to spring in Beacon Hill, bringing with it not only the blossoming of flowers, but also a palpable change in Arthur Finch's life. Lily's presence in his home had transformed the cold mausoleum of memories into a home filled with life and laughter. This Saturday morning, Arthur watched Lily play in the small garden he had created on his balcony. Her laughter echoed through the apartment, a sound he never imagined hearing again in his home. "Uncle Arthur!" Lily shouted, running towards him, her hands full of daisies. "Look what I found." Arthur smiled, bending down to her level. "They're beautiful, Lily. Shall we put them in a vase?" As he helped Lily arrange the flowers in a vase, Arthur was overcome with a wave of emotion. Over the past few months, he had grown attached to this child in a way he never thought possible. The thought of losing her, of seeing her return to Amelia or anyone else, was unbearable. The ringing of the intercom interrupted his thoughts. Arthur opened the door to find Mrs. Davis looking serious. "Mr. Finch," she greeted him. "Could we talk?" Arthur nodded, feeling a knot forming in his stomach. "Lily, sweetie," he called, "why don't you go play in your room for a while?" Once Lily was gone, Arthur led Mrs. Davis to the living room. "What is it?" he asked, dreading the answer. Mrs. Davis sighed, pulling some papers from her file. "We have news about Amelia Rivers." Arthur straightened up, attentive. "You found her?" "Not exactly," Mrs. Davis replied, "but we traced her to a rehab center in Baltimore about 6 months ago." Arthur digested the information. "So she's still battling her addiction?" "Yes," Mrs. Davis completed. "But that's not all. We also found a birth certificate. Lily has a half-brother, born 2 years ago." The news hit Arthur like a punch. "A brother? But where is he?" "With his father," Mrs. Davis explained. "A man named Peter Finch." The name made Arthur start. "Peter, the same Peter that—" Mrs. Davis nodded. "We believe so. He's the father of Lily's half-brother, but not of Lily. Apparently, Amelia contacted him after leaving Lily here." Arthur stood up, walking to the window. His mind reeled with the implications. What does this mean for Lily, for her situation here? Mrs. Davis hesitated before answering. "Legally, it complicates things. Peter has expressed interest in obtaining custody of Lily, to reunite her with her brother." "No," Arthur turned abruptly. "He's not even her father. He can't just show up and take her." "Mr. Finch," Mrs. Davis said softly, "I understand your frustration, but Peter has a strong case. He can offer Lily a connection to her biological family, including a brother." Arthur felt panic rising within him. "And me. I'm her family now. I love her as if she were my own daughter." The words had come out before he could contain them, and the silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Davis watched him with a mixture of compassion and concern. "Mr. Finch," she began cautiously, "I know you've grown attached to Lily, but we have to consider what's best for her in the long run." Arthur slumped onto the sofa, feeling defeated. "What's best for her is to stay here, with me. I can give her stability, love, everything she needs." Mrs. Davis nodded slowly. "I know, and believe me, that will be taken into consideration. But the situation is complicated. We'll need a hearing to determine custody." Arthur raised his head, fierce determination in his eyes. "Then that's what we'll do. I'll fight for her, Mrs. Davis, with everything I have." "I understand," Mrs. Davis said, standing up. "But I must ask you to be prepared, Mr. Finch. This could be a difficult battle." After Mrs. Davis left, Arthur sat in silence, absorbing everything that had just happened. The thought of losing Lily was unbearable, but he knew the battle ahead would be brutal. "Uncle Arthur!" Lily's soft voice pulled him from his thoughts. She stood at the doorway, her big eyes filled with concern. "Are you sad?" Arthur forced a smile, opening his arms. Lily ran to him, snuggling against him. "No, sweetie," he murmured, kissing the top of her head. "I was just thinking, that's all." "About what?" she asked, looking up at him. Arthur hesitated, unsure of what to tell her. "Lily," he began cautiously, "you know I love you very much, don't you?" Lily nodded, smiling. "I love you too, Uncle Arthur. And you're happy here with me." "Yes," she exclaimed. "You're my family now." Lily's words sealed Arthur's decision. He hugged her tightly, determination growing within him. "Yes, we are a family," he murmured, "and I'll do everything I can to keep our family together. I promise you." Holding Lily close, Arthur knew the battle ahead would be the most important of his life. But for the first time in years, he had something worth fighting for, and he wouldn't give up without giving it his all. The law office in downtown Boston contrasted sharply with the rest of the picturesque city. Modern and impersonal, it seemed out of place among the family-owned shops and historic buildings. Arthur nervously adjusted his tie as he waited at the reception desk. After weeks of preparation and sleepless nights, he was finally ready to begin the legal proceedings for Lily's custody. "Mr. Finch," a voice called, pulling him from his thoughts. "Mr. Miller is waiting for you." Arthur followed the receptionist to a spacious office where a middle-aged man awaited him with a professional smile. "Mr. Finch, welcome," the lawyer greeted him, extending his hand. "I understand we're dealing with a rather unique custody case." Arthur nodded, taking a seat. "Mr. Miller, I'll be frank. I'll do whatever it takes to keep Lily with me. Money is no object." The lawyer inclined his head, studying Arthur for a moment. "Mr. Finch, I appreciate your determination, but I must warn you, custody cases are complex, especially when they involve biological parents." "But they abandoned her," Arthur argued, frustration creeping into his voice. "And doesn't that count for anything?" "Yes, of course," Mr. Miller assured him. "But the court will also consider Lily's long-term well-being. The connection with her biological family, including her half-brother, will be an important factor." Arthur felt his heart clench. "So what are our chances?" The lawyer sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Honestly? It's hard to say. Your record as Lily's temporary guardian is excellent, but Peter Finch has a strong case, being the father of Lily's half-brother and offering a family environment." Arthur closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. "What can we do?" "We'll build the strongest possible case," Mr. Miller replied. "So as we'll highlight your dedication, Lily's progress under your care, the stability you offer her, and—" The lawyer hesitated, prompting Arthur to look at him curiously. "And what?" "Well, Mr. Finch, I couldn't help but notice in your file. You have a daughter, don't you, Ashley, if I'm not mistaken?" Arthur felt his stomach churn. "Yes, but we're not close." Mr. Miller leaned forward, his gaze serious. "Mr. Finch, having the support of your adult daughter could significantly strengthen our case. It would show the court that you have experience as a father and that you can offer Lily an extended family." Arthur shook his head, guilt and regret weighing in his voice. "Ashley, she won't want to get involved. We've barely spoken in years. I understand it's difficult," the lawyer said softly, "but I ask you to consider it. Sometimes situations like these can be an opportunity for healing and reconciliation." Arthur left the office, his head spinning. The thought of contacting Ashley terrified him, but if it meant keeping Lily— His thoughts were interrupted by his phone ringing. It was John. "Arthur, my friend," the chef's voice sounded worried. "You need to come to the cafe now." "John, it's not a good time. I just left the lawyer's office and—" "Arthur," John interrupted, his voice urgent. "Ashley's here." Arthur's world seemed to stop. "Ashley? But how?" "I don't know," John replied. "She showed up asking about you. She looks distraught." "I'm on my way," Arthur said, hanging up and running to his car. The drive to the Chestnut Street coffee house had never seemed so long. When he finally entered, the bell above the door announcing his arrival, the cafe was almost empty, except for a lone figure sitting at a table in the back. Ashley looked up, and Arthur felt his heart clench. His daughter, now 30, looked so different from the rebellious young woman he had known years ago. Her eyes, once filled with anger, now seemed tired and scared. "Dad," she said, her voice slightly trembling. "Ashley," Arthur replied, approaching cautiously. I didn't expect to see you." Ashley let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, well, I didn't expect to be here either, but things have changed." Arthur sat down opposite her, noticing the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly. "What happened?" For a moment, Ashley seemed to struggle with herself. Then, with a defeated sigh, she spoke. "I messed up everything, Dad. My job, my apartment, everything." Arthur felt a wave of guilt and worry. How could he have been so oblivious to his daughter's struggles? "Ashley, I'm sorry. I should have been there for you." Ashley looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "It's not your fault. I made my own choices." An awkward silence settled between them, years of unspoken resentment and regret hanging in the air. Finally, Arthur asked, "Why did you come back now?" Ashley looked away, biting her lip. "I heard about the little girl. Lily, people talk, you know." Arthur felt his heart quicken. "What did you hear?" "That you're taking care of her. That you're different." Ashley stared at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of emotions Arthur couldn't decipher. "Is it true? Have you really changed?" The vulnerability in his daughter's voice almost broke Arthur. "Ashley, yes. Lily showed me that I could still be the father I should have always been. The father you deserved." Tears started to well up in Ashley's eyes. Why her? Why not me? The question hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. "Oh, Ashley," he breathed, hesitantly reaching out to touch his daughter's hand. To his surprise, she didn't pull away. "I made so many mistakes with you, so many, and there isn't a day that goes by that I don't regret it. But Lily, she gave me a second chance, a chance to do things right." Ashley fought back her tears, her voice breaking. "And me? Is there still a chance for us?" Arthur felt his own heart break and rebuild at the same time. "Always, my daughter. There will always be a chance for us." At that moment, the barriers they had built over the years began to crumble. Ashley threw herself into her father's arms, sobbing, and Arthur held her tight, his own tears flowing freely. John, watching discreetly from the kitchen, smiled through his own tears. "Sometimes," he thought, "it takes a little angel like Lily to heal old wounds and reunite broken families." As father and daughter reconciled, the battle for Lily's custody seemed, for a moment, distant. But Arthur knew that now, with Ashley by his side, he was stronger than ever. And he would fight with all his might to keep his family, all of his family, together. The morning sun streamed through the curtains of Arthur's living room, illuminating a scene that, just weeks ago, would have seemed impossible. Arthur, Ashley, and Lily were sitting on the floor, laughing as they assembled a giant jigsaw puzzle. "No, Lily, that piece goes there?" Ashley exclaimed, laughing as she helped the little girl place a particularly tricky piece. Arthur watched the interaction between his daughter and Lily with a mixture of joy and disbelief. Since their emotional reunion at John's cafe, Ashley had temporarily moved in with her father, determined to rebuild their relationship and get to know Lily. "Uncle Arthur, look, we finished the sky," Lily cried enthusiastically, pointing to the top of the puzzle. Arthur smiled, affectionately ruffling Lily's hair. "Well done, sweetie. You two make a good team." Ashley looked at her father, a hesitant smile on her lips. It was evident that she was still getting used to this new family dynamic, but each day, the tensions of the past seemed to fade a little more. The moment was interrupted by the ringing of the intercom. Arthur stood up, frowning. He wasn't expecting any visitors this Sunday morning. Opening the door, he was surprised to see Mrs. Davis on the landing, looking serious. "Mr. Finch," she greeted him. "Excuse me for showing up unannounced, but there's news about Lily's case and I couldn't wait. Arthur felt his heart quicken. "Please, come in." Leading Mrs. Davis to the kitchen, away from Lily's curious ears, Arthur noticed the social worker's surprised look at seeing Ashley. "This is my daughter, Ashley," Arthur explained quickly. "She's living with us for the time being." Mrs. Davis nodded, a slight smile on her lips. "Nice to meet you, Ashley. Your presence here could be very significant for the case." Ashley looked perplexed, but before she could ask any questions, Arthur intervened. "What's the news, Mrs. Davis?" Mrs. Davis sighed, placing her file on the kitchen table. "Peter Finch has officially filed for custody of Lily. He claims to be able to offer her a stable family environment with her half-brother." Arthur felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "He can't do that. He's not even Lily's biological father." "Legally, he can," Mrs. Davis explained softly, "and the court will take his request seriously, given the family connection." Ashley, who had remained silent until then, spoke up. "But what about my father? He's been taking care of Lily all this time. Doesn't that count for anything?" Mrs. Davis turned to Ashley, her expression softening. "Yes, of course. In fact, Ashley's presence here considerably strengthens your father's case, Mr. Finch. It shows that Lily has a stable, extended family here." Arthur looked at his daughter, feeling a wave of gratitude. Ashley smiled back, determination shining in her eyes. "What can we do?" Arthur asked, turning his attention back to Mrs. Davis. "The custody hearing is set for a month from now," Mrs. Davis informed him. "Until then, we need to gather all possible evidence demonstrating that staying with you is in Lily's best interest. This includes testimonials from loved ones, school reports, anything that attests to Lily's progress and happiness since she's been under your care." Ashley stood up, a new energy in her posture. "I can help. I can talk to Lily's teachers, to John, to whoever it takes." Arthur looked at his daughter with surprise and pride. "Ashley, you don't have to—" "I want to, Dad," she interrupted him firmly. "Lily is part of our family now. And we Finches, we fight for what's ours, don't we?" The moment was interrupted by a slight noise coming from the living room. The three adults turned to see Lily standing in the doorway, her big blue eyes wide with fear. "Lily," Arthur began, but the little girl was already running to her room. Ashley started to follow her, but Arthur held her back. "Let me go," he said softly. "I think she needs to hear it from me." Arthur found Lily curled up in her bed, clutching her favorite teddy bear. His heart ached at the sight of the tears in the little girl's eyes. "Hey, princess," he said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Do you want to tell me what's making you sad?" Lily sniffled, looking at Arthur with tearful eyes. "I'm going to have to leave, aren't I? Like last time." Arthur felt like his heart was breaking. He pulled Lily into his arms, holding her tight, feeling her small body tremble. "Lily, look at me," he said, pulling back slightly so he could look her in the eyes. "I promise you, with all my heart, that I will do everything in my power to keep you here with us. You're part of our family now." "But what if they take me away?" Lily murmured, fear evident in her voice. Arthur took a deep breath, fighting back his own tears. "Then I'll fight. I'll fight with all my strength, because that's what families do, they fight for each other." Lily hugged him tightly, burying her face in his chest. "I love you, Uncle Arthur." "I love you too, sweetie," Arthur replied, his voice choked with emotion. At that moment, Ashley appeared in the doorway. Her eyes met her father's, and a silent understanding passed between them. Without a word, Ashley joined the hug, wrapping Lily and her father in her arms. There, in that impromptu family embrace, Arthur felt a fierce determination grow within him. He had made mistakes in the past, mistakes that had almost cost him his relationship with Ashley. But now, with Lily, he had a second chance, a chance to be the father he should have always been, and he wouldn't let anyone take that away from him without a fight. The Chestnut Street coffee house was unusually quiet on this rainy Thursday afternoon. John absently wiped the counter, his mind elsewhere, when the jingling of the bell announced the arrival of a customer. "Arthur, my friend," John exclaimed, a sincere smile lighting up his tired face. "Good to see you." Arthur sat at the counter, worry etched on his face. "John, I need your help." The chef stopped what he was doing, noticing the seriousness in his friend's tone. "Of course, what is it?" "It's about Lily," Arthur began, his voice low. "The custody hearing is approaching and, well, Mrs. Davis thinks your testimony could be crucial." John nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'll do whatever it takes to help, you know that." Arthur let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you, John, but there's something else. We need to talk about Amelia." The name hung in the air, heavy with unresolved tension. John turned away, busying himself with the coffee machine. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," Arthur replied. "The smallest detail could be important." John remained silent for a long moment, as if gathering his courage. When he finally turned around, his eyes were filled with a mixture of guilt and sadness. "Amelia," he began, his voice trembling. "She wasn't just an employee, Arthur. She was my niece." The revelation hit Arthur like a bolt of lightning. "Your niece? But why didn't you ever tell me?" John sat down heavily, rubbing his tired face. "Because I failed her, Arthur. I failed her miserably." Meanwhile, across town, Ashley paced nervously in the living room of her father's apartment. Lily watched her curiously from the sofa where she was drawing. "Ashley," the little girl called out, "are you okay?" Ashley stopped, forcing a smile. "Of course, sweetie. I'm just thinking, that's all." At that moment, the doorbell rang. Ashley frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. Opening the door, she found herself face to face with a woman she didn't know. "Can I help you?" Ashley asked cautiously. The woman smiled some, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "You must be Ashley." "I'm Chloe Finch, Peter's wife." Ashley's heart skipped a beat. This was the woman who wanted to take Lily away from them. "What do you want?" "To talk," Chloe replied softly, "about Lily." Back at the cafe, John continued his confession before a stunned Arthur. "Amelia came to live with me after my sister's death," John explained. She was having problems, hanging out with the wrong crowd. I thought I could help her, give her a fresh start." Arthur listened intently, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. "And that's where she met Peter." John nodded sadly. "Yes, Peter was a regular customer, charming, successful. Amelia fell head over heels in love with him. But something went wrong," Arthur deduced. "Peter was married," John revealed. "When Amelia discovered she was pregnant, he rejected her completely. She was devastated, lost, and I didn't know how to handle the situation." Arthur felt a wave of compassion for his friend. What happened next?" John wiped away a stray tear. "She left one night, leaving just a note. She said she couldn't stay, that she had to start over somewhere else. I looked for her, Arthur. I swear I looked for her, but she didn't want to be found." At Arthur's apartment, Ashley and Chloe were sitting in the living room, a tense silence between them. Lily had been sent to play in her room, away from the adult conversation. "Why are you really here?" Ashley asked, her voice laced with suspicion. Chloe sighed, her gaze wandering around the room. "I wanted to understand." "Understand what?" "Why Lily seems so happy here," Chloe replied, her eyes finally meeting Ashley's. "Peter is obsessed with the idea of bringing her back into our family, but I'm not sure it's the right thing to do." Ashley felt her hostility lessen slightly. "You care about her well-being," Chloe nodded. "More than Peter, I fear. For him, it's more about fixing past mistakes." "What mistakes?" Ashley pressed, sensing they were getting to something important. Chloe hesitated, visibly torn. "Peter, he's Lily's biological father." The revelation stunned Ashley. "But how?" "It was an affair years ago," Chloe explained, her voice weary. "I only found out recently. Peter wants Lily now because he feels guilty for abandoning her." Back at the cafe, Arthur was absorbing everything John had revealed. "John, you have to testify." "The judge needs to know this story." John shook his head, fear evident in his eyes. "And admit that I abandoned my own niece, that I let Lily be placed in foster care." "You didn't abandon anyone," Arthur insisted. "You tried to help Amelia, and now you have a chance to help Lily." At that moment, Arthur's phone rang. It was Ashley. "Dad," she said urgently, "you need to come home." Right away. Arthur quickly excused himself from John and rushed home, his mind racing with worry and revelations. Arriving, he found Ashley on the landing, her face pale. "What happened?" he asked, alarmed. Ashley looked at her father, her eyes filled with determination. "Dad, things just got a lot more complicated. But we now know something that could change everything." As Ashley recounted her conversation with Chloe, Arthur felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. The battle for Lily's custody had just become much more personal and complex than he could have ever imagined. But one thing was clear: he wouldn't give up without a fight. Lily was his family now, and he would do everything to protect her. As night fell on Beacon Hill, the intertwined destinies of Arthur, Lily, John, and the Finches seemed to converge towards an inevitable confrontation. The truth, buried for so long, was finally emerging, and its consequences would change their lives forever. Exceptionally, the Chestnut Street coffee house was closed to the public that afternoon. John had reluctantly agreed to host a meeting that Mrs. Davis deemed of utmost importance. The atmosphere was tense as Arthur, Ashley, John, and, surprisingly, Peter and Chloe Finch gathered around a large round table. Mrs. Davis entered last, carrying a thick briefcase. Her face was serious, her eyes heavy with the weight of what she was about to reveal. "I thank everyone for coming," she began in a firm but gentle voice. "I know these past few weeks have been difficult for all of you, but what I have to share today will change everything we thought we knew about Lily's situation." Arthur shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "What have you discovered, Mrs. Davis?" Mrs. Davis opened her briefcase and took out a photograph. She placed it in the center of the table, and everyone leaned in to see. It was a young woman with brown hair and piercing blue eyes that were undeniably familiar. "This," Mrs. Davis said calmly, "is Amelia Rivers, Lily's biological mother." A stunned silence fell over the group. John was the first to react, his face visibly paling. "It's not possible," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Amelia?" Mrs. Davis turned to John, her eyes filled with compassion. "Yes, John. Amelia worked here at the Chestnut Street coffee house about 9 years ago." The chef looked as if he had been struck by lightning. He slumped back in his chair, the realization hitting him hard. "My God," he whispered. "How didn't I realize that? How didn't I see it?" Arthur looked at his friend, perplexed. "John, you knew this woman?" John nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the photograph. "She worked here for almost a year. She was a sweet, quiet girl. I should have noticed something," Mrs. Davis continued, her voice soft but firm. "Amelia left Beacon Hill abruptly 8.5 years ago. According to our information, she was pregnant at the time." Peter Finch, who had remained silent until then, spoke up. "But that doesn't make any sense. I'm Lily's father. Amelia and I never—" He stopped, the color draining from his face as a distant memory seemed to resurface. Mrs. Davis looked Peter straight in the eye. "Mr. Finch, our investigations suggest that you and Amelia had a brief relationship during the time she worked at the cafe. It's possible you were unaware of the pregnancy." Chloe let out a small sigh, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Peter's face was a mixture of shock and guilt. I didn't know," he murmured. "She never told me." Ashley, who had remained silent, absorbing everything, finally spoke. "But why would Amelia abandon Lily? Why come back now just to leave her again?" Mrs. Davis sighed deeply. "Amelia has been battling drug addiction for years. When Lily was born, she tried to stay sober, but she had a severe relapse. That's when she decided to leave Lily with social services, believing the little girl would have a better life." Arthur felt his heart clench. The whole situation was even more tragic than he had imagined. "And now, where is Amelia?" "She's in rehab," Mrs. Davis replied. "She's been there for 6 months. That's why she left Lily here in Beacon Hill. She wanted her daughter to know her roots while she tried to get back on her feet one last time." John stood up abruptly, walking towards the window. His shoulders trembled slightly. "I should have helped her," he said, his voice choked. "I knew something was wrong with Amelia, but I didn't do enough." Arthur stood up and placed a comforting hand on his friend's shoulder. "You couldn't have known, John. Don't blame yourself. Mrs. Davis cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention again. There's one more thing you need to know. Amelia has expressed the wish that Lily stay with Mr. Finch. This statement caused another wave of shock in the room. Peter stood up, indignant. But I'm the father. I have rights. Mr. Finch, Mrs. Davis said firmly. Legally, you have rights, yes, but we must consider what's best for Lily. She has developed a strong bond with Mr. Finch and his family. Tearing her away now could be traumatic. Chloe gently tugged on her husband's arm, making him sit back down. Her eyes were filled with unshed tears. Peter, she said softly, maybe we should think about what's best for Lily, not for us. Silence fell over the group as everyone absorbed the shocking revelations. Arthur looked around the table, seeing the impact the truth had had on each of them. John seemed devastated, the weight of guilt evident in his slumped shoulders. Peter was struggling with his own conscience, years of unconscious neglect weighing on him. Chloe seemed resigned, but with a touch of relief in her eyes. Ashley was pensive, her gaze alternating between her father and the photo of Amelia. As for Arthur, he felt overwhelmed. The truth about Lily's origins was more complicated and painful than he could have ever imagined. But amidst all the confusion and pain, one thing was clear. His love for Lily and his determination to protect her had only grown stronger. What happens now? Ashley asked, breaking the silence. Mrs. Davis looked at each of them before answering. Now, you all have difficult decisions to make. The court will consider Amelia's wishes, but it will also take into account Mr. Finch's legal rights and Lily's current well-being with Mr. Finch. Arthur straightened up, his voice firm. I will fight for her. Lily is my family now, and I will do whatever it takes to ensure she is safe and happy. John turned away from the window, his eyes red but determined. And I will support you, my friend. It's the least I can do after failing Amelia. Peter and Chloe exchanged a long, meaningful look before Peter spoke. I need time to think. This is a lot to take in. Mrs. Davis nodded understandingly. Of course, you will all have time to consider your positions before the final hearing. But remember, the most important thing here is Lily's well-being. As the group dispersed, each lost in their own thoughts and moral dilemmas, Arthur stayed at the cafe with John. The two friends sat in silence, the weight of the revelations hanging over them. John, Arthur finally said, whatever happens, know that you're not alone. We're a family now, you and me, Ashley and Lily. John looked at his friend, a slight smile appearing on his tired face. Thank you, Arthur. You're a good man. Lily is lucky to have you. As the sun set on Beacon Hill, casting long shadows through the cafe windows, Arthur knew that the battle for Lily's custody was far from over. But with the truth finally revealed and the support of his loved ones, he felt more ready than ever to face whatever came next. The truth had been brought to light, and it was now up to them all to decide how that truth would shape the future. Not only Lily's, but their own as well. The rising sun cast its first rays over Boston. For John, this new day brought only a crushing weight of guilt and responsibility. Sitting in his favorite armchair, he contemplated the phone in his hands, unable to make the call he knew was necessary. The previous day's revelations had shaken the foundations of his life and those around him. Lily's words echoed in his mind, constantly reminding him of the secret he had kept for so long and the consequences that were now unfolding. How could I have been so selfish?" he murmured, running a hand through his graying hair. Guilt gnawed at him, not only for what he had done in the past, but also for having remained silent for so many years. Meanwhile, in another part of Boston, Arthur and Ashley sat at the kitchen table, their cups of coffee untouched before them. The silence between them was heavy, laden with years of resentment and bitterness. But now, a new urgency united them, the need to help Lily. "We have to do something," Ashley finally said, her voice trembling. "Lily, she must be devastated." Arthur nodded slowly, his eyes meeting Ashley's for the first time in years without hostility. "Yes, we do. But how? After everything that... Maybe it's time to leave the past behind us," Ashley suggested hesitantly. "For Lily." The words hung in the air, heavy with possibilities. Arthur reached across the table, lightly touching Ashley's fingers. It was a simple gesture, but a meaningful one, a first step towards reconciliation. Mrs. Davis, meanwhile, was engaged in a frantic search. Since dawn, she had been pacing the streets of Boston, visiting Amelia's old haunts, hoping to find a clue to her whereabouts. "Are you sure you haven't seen her?" she asked for the umpteenth time to the owner of a small cafe Amelia used to frequent. The man shook his head regretfully. "Sorry, ma'am. I haven't seen her in years." Mrs. Davis left the cafe, despair rising within her. She knew Amelia had to know the truth. But how could she break such devastating news to someone she couldn't even find? As she walked through the busy streets, her phone rang. It was Lily. "Mrs. Davis." Lily's voice was just a whisper. I don't know what to do." "Mrs." Davis felt her heart clench. "Oh, Lily, where are you? Do you want me to come and get you?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I don't know if I want to see anyone right now. Everything seems unreal." "I understand," Mrs. Davis replied gently. "But remember, you're not alone. We're all here for you." "All?" Lily repeated bitterly. "Including Uncle John, the man who lied to me my whole life." Mrs. Davis closed her eyes, feeling the weight of Lily's words. "He made a terrible mistake, Lily, but he loves you. We all love you." "Love?" Lily laughed humorlessly. "Love shouldn't be based on lies." "No, indeed," Mrs. Davis conceded. But sometimes people make bad choices thinking they're protecting the ones they love. I don't excuse what John did, but maybe there's a chance to understand and, who knows, forgive." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Mrs. Davis could almost feel Lily's inner struggle. "I don't know if I can," Lily finally replied, her voice choked. "But thank you for being there, Mrs. Davis. Always," Mrs. Davis promised. "When you're ready, we'll be here, all of us." Meanwhile, John had finally mustered the courage to make the call he dreaded. His hands trembled as he dialed Arthur's number. "Hello?" Arthur's voice was cautious. "Arthur," John began, his voice hesitant. I'm sorry. For everything." There was a long silence before Arthur replied, "John, what you did, it's hard to forgive." "I know," John replied, tears starting to stream down his face. "I don't expect forgiveness, but Lily, she needs us. All of us." Arthur sighed deeply. "Yes, she needs us. And it's for her that I'm willing to try to move past this." Arthur's words were like a balm on John's tormented soul. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. "Thank you, Arthur," John said softly. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this for all of you." As the conversation continued, Ashley watched Arthur, noticing the change in his expression. Years of bitterness seemed to slowly melt away, replaced by a new determination. When Arthur hung up, he turned to Ashley. "John wants to see us. All of us, for Lily." Ashley nodded slowly. "I think it's time to face all of this together." Arthur reached out, squeezing Ashley's hand firmly. "But together," he repeated, the word laden with promises of reconciliation and healing. As the day progressed, each of the players in this family drama struggled with their own emotions and inner demons. John, consumed by guilt, sought ways to redeem himself. Arthur and Ashley, united once again by adversity, tried to rebuild the trust that had been lost for so long. Mrs. Davis, tireless in her search for Amelia, refused to give up on piecing together the broken fragments of this family, and Lily, at the center of it all, struggled to find her place in this new world that had been revealed to her. Her certainties had been shaken, her identity questioned. But as she walked through the streets of Boston, the city that had always been her home, she began to realize that, despite everything, there was still love. An imperfect love, tainted by mistakes and secrets, but love nonetheless. Night fell on Boston, enveloping the city in a cloak of twinkling lights. In different neighborhoods, 5 people, John, Arthur, Ashley, Mrs. Davis, and Lily, contemplated the starry sky, each lost in their own thoughts, but all united by invisible bonds of family, love, and the hope of healing. The road ahead would be long and difficult, paved with painful conversations and uncomfortable truths. But that night, under the same Boston sky, they all shared a common thought. Family, however imperfect, was worth fighting for. And together, perhaps, they could rebuild what had been broken. Snow fell softly outside, covering Boston in a white, silent blanket. Inside Arthur's warm apartment, the scent of cinnamon and pine filled the air, mingling with laughter and lively conversation. It was Christmas Eve, a year to the day after that fateful night that had forever changed the lives of everyone present. Arthur watched the scene before him with a serene smile. John was crouched near the Christmas tree, helping Lily, now almost 6 years old, hang the last decorations on the lower branches. Mrs. Davis and Ashley were in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on the dinner that would soon be served. "Uncle John, look, I put the star right there," Lily exclaimed, proudly pointing to a shiny decoration she had just hung. John smiled, stroking the little girl's hair. "It's perfect, sweetie. Your mum would be very proud of you." The mention of Amelia brought a moment of thoughtful silence. Although the pain of loss was still present, it had been softened by time and by the love that had grown between this unlikely group. Arthur approached, holding a tray with steaming mugs of hot cocoa. "Who wants to warm up a bit?" Lily ran towards him, her eyes shining with anticipation. "Me, Grandpa Arthur." The word Grandpa always made Arthur's heart beat a little faster. It was a title he had never expected to have, but which he now wore with immense pride and gratitude. John stood up, accepting a mug. "Thank you, Arthur, for everything." The two men exchanged a look of mutual understanding. A year ago, they were strangers brought together by tragic circumstances. Now, they were almost family. Mrs. Davis and Ashley emerged from the kitchen, bringing the last dishes for the festive table. "It's ready," Marie announced, her eyes shining with satisfaction as she saw everyone's reaction to the beautifully set table. Ashley placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "Come on, sweetie. Let's wash our hands before we eat." While Lily followed Ashley to the bathroom, the adults exchanged meaningful glances. It was incredible to see how their lives had intertwined in such deep and unexpected ways. Arthur cleared his throat, trying to contain the emotion in his voice. "You know, sometimes I wonder if I hadn't intervened that night." "But you did intervene," John interrupted gently, "and it made all the difference." Mrs. Davis nodded, her eyes moist. "A simple act of kindness. Who could have imagined where it would lead us?" The silence that followed was charged with emotion, each lost in their own thoughts and memories. When Lily and Ashley returned, everyone took their places at the table. Arthur, as host, raised his glass. "Before we begin, I would like to propose a toast," he said, his voice slightly trembling. "To Amelia, whose memory brought us together and continues to inspire each of us." "To Amelia," everyone repeated, including Lily, who, although young, understood the importance of this moment. John added softly, "and to new beginnings." The meal unfolded in a warm and intimate atmosphere. Stories were shared, laughter echoed, and even a few discreet tears were shed. To an outside observer, they would have looked like an ordinary family celebrating Christmas, and in a way, that's exactly what they had become. After dessert, while Lily played with her new gifts near the tree, the adults gathered in the living room, each with a glass of red wine. "It's incredible to think how much our lives have changed in just 1 year," Ashley mused, looking at Lily affectionately. Arthur nodded. "When I stopped that night, I never imagined being here, a year later, surrounded by family. An unconventional family," Mrs. Davis added with a smile. John looked thoughtfully at his glass of wine. "You know, for a long time after Amelia's death, I felt lost, as if a part of me had died with her. But now, Arthur encouraged softly, "now, I feel like I'm honoring her memory in the best possible way," John completed, "by taking care of Lily, by being part of this unconventional family." Mrs. Davis placed a comforting hand on John's arm. "Amelia would be proud of you, John, of all of us, in fact." Arthur stood up and walked to the window. The snow continued to fall outside, creating an almost magical landscape. "You know, I spent most of my life focusing on work, convinced that it was what would bring me happiness and fulfillment. But now, you have a granddaughter to spoil, Ashley joked, causing light laughter. Arthur smiled, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Yes, and much more than that. I have a family. I have a purpose beyond my work. John joined Arthur at the window. It's funny how life works, isn't it? One moment we're following one path and the next moment, everything changes, Mrs. Davis completed. Ashley watched Lily, now sleeping peacefully on the rug, surrounded by her new toys. I think we all found some kind of redemption this year, a chance to be better, to make a difference. Arthur nodded gravely. That's right. Each of us carried our own wounds, our own struggles, but together we are stronger, John concluded. A comfortable silence settled, each lost in their own thoughts and reflections. The steady ticking of the clock and Lily's peaceful breathing were the only sounds that disturbed the quiet atmosphere. Finally, Mrs. Davis broke the silence. Do you know what impresses me the most? How a simple act of kindness can trigger such a powerful chain reaction. Ashley nodded. It's true. Arthur stopped to help that little girl that night, and look where we are now. It makes you think, John said thoughtfully. How many other lives could we touch if we continued to practice these acts of kindness? Arthur smiled, a new light shining in his eyes. Maybe that's our next chapter, using our experiences, our rebirth, so to speak, to make a difference in the lives of others. Mrs. Davis raised her glass. I raise my glass to that, to continuing to spread kindness and love, in memory of Amelia and to celebrate what we have built together. Everyone raised their glasses, the crystalline clinking echoing in the warm living room. Lily stirred in her sleep, a slight smile lighting up her lips, as if, even in her dreams, she felt the love that surrounded her. As the evening progressed, the conversation flowed naturally between light and deeper topics. Plans were made for the future, not only for them as an unconventional family unit, but also on how they could extend their compassion and support to the community around them. Arthur talked about using his resources and connections to create a foundation in Amelia's memory, focused on helping single mothers and children in precarious situations. John, inspired by his personal journey, expressed the desire to become a counselor for people facing grief and loss. Mrs. Davis and Ashley, meanwhile, discussed the possibility of launching a mentoring program for at-risk youth, using their own life experiences as a basis to guide and inspire. As midnight approached, John gently woke Lily. Come on, sweetie, it's time to go see the fireworks. Still sleepy but excited, Lily joined the adults on the balcony. The Boston sky exploded in a myriad of bright colors, marking the beginning of Christmas. Arthur, holding Lily in his arms, looked at the group gathered around him. Each face told a story of pain, loss, but also of hope, love, and redemption. At that moment, under the starry Boston sky, illuminated by fireworks, Arthur felt a deep gratitude. A year ago, he was a lonely man focused solely on his career. Now he was at the heart of a makeshift family, united by love and a shared desire to make a difference in the world. As the last fireworks lit up the sky, Arthur made a silent promise to himself, to Amelia and to everyone present. This was just the beginning. The next chapter of their lives would be dedicated to spreading the same kindness and love that had brought them together. And so, as Christmas arrived, bringing with it the promise of a new year, this unconventional family embraced, their hearts filled with hope and determination. The future, with all its possibilities, awaited them, and they would face it together, stronger than ever.